Our next guest speaker is a recipient of the 2018 ENEDA Outstanding Entrepreneurship Educator Award. She is also a food professor and the Dean of the Ramon V. Del Rosario College of Business of the De La Salle University. Let us all welcome Dr. Emilina R. Sarreal.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Noel. Do you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
So I'd like to thank, of course, ENEDA through Mr. Noel Aban and, of course, Dr. Carl Balita for giving me the opportunity to share my knowledge as an academic researcher and faculty. I'm hoping to bridge actually theory and practice, and I'm very fortunate to speak before esteemed members of the business community. So if I may share some of the slides that I made. Okay. Okay, so the title of my webinar is Fearless Forecast: What if the COVID-19 pandemic lasts for 18 months and beyond? So while it's nice to hope for the best, it can be often useful to plan for the worst case scenario. Thus, I would like to play as a prophet of doom, and I sincerely hope and pray to God that this will not happen. So I got the link from a YouTube video of the same title. Me hooked because aside from the lively animated graphics, the video content was direct to the point and it really made sense. The infographics video was uploaded in YouTube this April, roughly the 4th month we have been battling the pandemic. After all has been said, the bottom line is, even after the lockdown or ECQ, we cannot go back to our normal lives as we should be practicing social or physical distance. The vaccine, until we wait for the vaccine or antidote to be finally and successfully launched for everyone. So this slide, I also got this from the YouTube source, that businesses likely to be damaged by mandated social distancing. So we all know from government pronouncements that we're really having a problem with social distancing, even during ECQ at that. We have more than 100,000 people violating. From the screen, if you have, I will read it for you. So the businesses likely to be damaged by mandatory social distancing, it would be restaurants, cafes, bars, nightclubs, gyms, hotels, theaters, cinemas, art galleries, shopping malls, trade fairs, museums, sporting venues, okay, goodbye to UAAP, conference venues, cruise lines, airlines, public transportation, private schools, and of course, some of our daycare centers. So what do you notice? So most of them are under the services sector because services would require rendering of services with the moment of truth, meaning rendering it directly to people who are availing of the service. So logically, by virtue of the value chain and supply chain that link business processes within and across businesses, naturally, all business, the services of these businesses that I mentioned will be heavily affected. So what does that mean? So there will be huge amount of stress to businesses. That will likely stall the economy. So several economic think tanks are predicting that the coronavirus pandemic will ultimately cause the rise of global poverty. So don't be sad, it's not just the Philippines, but it's global. So according to a Stratfor account for at least 50% of the global gross production. The massive collapse of global business and commercial activity would have long-term effects on the labor markets worldwide as pandemic-induced political instability and, of course, lack of employment opportunities affect global migration pressures. In the Philippines, overseas remittances, which has been usually the stable sources of income for middle and lower class families, economy. So in the past, Major sources of remittances have been the United States, Middle East, and parts of Europe. These economies have been relatively the most stable in the world. However, because of the pandemic, where they're also adversely affected, things would really have a big change. So as we remember, a pandemic is an outbreak of disease that affects a large area. In recent times, we have encountered SARS, of course, impacted the ability of organizations to do business. A pandemic can have major impact on the availability of our employees in businesses because them or members of their family could get sick from the disease. So that's why many governments are requiring important industries such as finance, energy, government, banking, and transportation to prepare for continuing operations during the pandemic. So my talk actually is concentrating on the organization at the firm level, wherein I'm directing this to the executives, firm owners, and managers of businesses. So the job of the business executive or owner is the coordination of the many activities necessary to create a successful business. Things that we do as managers and executives would be market analysis, identification of potential customers, strategizing for creating and delivering products and service, reported, and of course, we should be abiding by legislative mandates. And many different holders we should be satisfying. But you know, the world is a dangerous place where natural and man-made disasters can strike and disrupt business processes. So as an executive, you're responsible for the well-being of the organization, and it's critical that you have to plan to ensure that the business will continue its operations after such disasters. So the main objective should be to be. So in this slide that I'm showing, we're going to concentrate on business recovery strategies. So take note that when we say recovery strategy, it's only a sort of restoring vital business functions to a minimally acceptable level of service. It doesn't mean that it will be restored to the way that they were before. So the minimal level of service enables the company to provide a flow of goods and services to its planning a permanent recovery. Okay, so this is a simple framework that I have thought of after, we had the dry run last night. So this came from various sources. I'm going to show you the sources later in my last slide. So as I said, we are still in the midst of the pandemic, and it's just unfortunate that not many companies would know how to do business impact. Only a few SMEs would venture into business risk assessment. But in layman's term, this is the simple SWOT analysis that we've been doing. So we just renamed it and we called it business impact analysis. So business impact analysis is actually just knowing what are the critical activities that the company should watch out for, that without them, the core value cannot be delivered to the customers. And therefore, it follows that profitability. Okay, I'm showing on screen some of the definitions that I called from research. It's an analysis of the important functions that are essential for the operation of the business. We should determine which functions are vital to the success of the organization, as well as the priority in which these functions should be restored. So actually, if you ask me, what are those critical functions without giving you a long list? So the shortcut is try to know what is your company institution. The primary mission is to teach students, conduct research. So therefore, you should be able to know what are those activities that are relevant to teaching and research. So if you're a BPO, then what's important for you? It's for the call center agents, right? So they are the frontliners for your business. So it's not really rocket science for you to list down the critical functions, as long as you know what is the primary mission of the company. if you Google it, there's a lot of template that gives you the things that you should be, it's a checklist of what activities will prove to be important for the operations of the business. And then it should follow that a risk analysis should be undertaken. So we call it business risk assessment. So this is where we compare the risk analysis to the current controls applied in the company that identified its areas of vulnerability. So when we do business risk management or external risk, so external risk are risks that come from nature and can directly or indirectly close the business. So these usually disrupt customers and suppliers as well as their own employees. So if we take a look at the framework earlier, so after doing your business impact analysis, it goes into business risk assessment. And after doing your business risk assessment, you are now called two types of recovery strategies under a disaster management situation. So since we are in a pandemic, we have pandemic strategies. So this would include maintaining the business during a public health emergency that may run from 18 months or more. And then after doing the pandemic strategies, we should do business continuity strategies. So that is keeping the flow of products and services to customers despite significant failures in company processes. And then later on, the last two boxes on the two other strategies that will be available for our businesses to try to implement. Okay, so what are the pandemic strategies? So these are strategies that aim to continue operations at a level that permits it to remain in business. It's also meant to prevent the spread of disease into and within the organization. So it requires different strategies for major stakeholders. So we have employees, customers, and vendors. So as executives and business owners, these are the people, especially the employees, that are important and vital inputs to our operation. So they should be the priority in a pandemic strategy. So what are the normal or usual strategies for employees? So number one, employees can work from home, of course, but we have data that has to be kept private or confidential. So it's suggested if you have information technology or IT sections, you can task that IT section to provide VPN connections, which is a secured network, to minimize the amount of time that they spend in the office. And then number two, the company's sickness policy. So in short, HR managers, or since SMEs would normally have the owner and the HR manager one and the same person, the sickness policy must be relaxed so that sick people are not forced to come into the workplace. So anyone who is sick is encouraged to stay home. They should also stay home if they have a sick family member. So, this is the time for compassion. And we should always look for the welfare of our employees. Then areas used by the company workers must be periodically cleansed and cleaned and decontaminated thoroughly to address any infection brought travel into areas with high rate of pandemic infection should be instructed to work from home, as we said from the DOH, at least 14 days after exposure. So those would be common tactical strategies actually from the part of the employees. But for customers, we can probably say the areas where customers enter the facility or the store or the company must be cleaned thoroughly to address any infection brought in from outside. And complimentary hand sanitation should be provided in all your points of sale. It may be necessary to bring individual sanitation supplies for an extended period of time. And all customer returned products should be sanitized before examination. And then from the point of view of vendors or suppliers, of course, to maintain contact and communication with them, we can use video conferencing and other electronic tools to meet with the vendors. And then we really need to go face-to-face with low incidence of pandemic. So these things are part of the pandemic strategies which should be undertaken first before anything else. Because anyway, if you don't look after your employees, vendors, and customers, your business will cease operations. So after the pandemic strategies, we all go for what we call as business continuity. So business continuity is interchangeable point of view. You cannot be resilient until you have successfully implemented your business continuity, right? So it goes hand in hand that you should have a continuity plan so that you can say that you are practicing resilience in your business. Okay, sorry. So for the business continuity strategy, this is when your customers would never notice an interruption in service. So that's why this is after doing pandemic strategies. You should opt for business continuity. So what are the samples of impact that should be measuring after a disaster or pandemic so that you can write your business continuity strategies? So in quantitative terms, we have cumulative financial loss. Of course, by this time, your company is probably computing for the revenue loss plus cost incurred. How much is the lost sales, financial penalties that you have to pay if ever, wages paid for no work among employees, overtime wages paid to catch up, spoiled materials and finished goods. And then aside from cumulative financial loss, we also have to pay attention also on legal compliance, of course, customer confidence, supplier confidence, and of course, the damaged public image in case you have some deliveries that you can honor or maintain. Okay, so going back to the framework that I have created, so in case you have successfully implemented your pandemic and business continuity strategies, the company has options to implement either diversification strategies or defensive. But if you take a look, those who can see my slides, I made it one after another. So because I am an optimistic type of a person, I would normally give the company the chance to survive or the chance to exist. So that's why we don't call it quits yet. The last resort is defensive. But we recommend diversification strategies first. So this can be done without too much cash layout. It can be done via joint ventures or mergers or synergies with companies. So those who studied MBA, of course, you would know that diversification strategies could be either related or unrelated. So at this time, so that we will not spend too much cash, we will opt for related diversification. Why related diversification? Because you just have to use your existing machinery, equipment, and assets and just be innovative and think about new products or services that can be used for your related strategies. And then, as I was saying earlier, defensive strategies is the last resort. Possible defensive strategies could be retrenchment, divestiture, and liquidation. So retrenchment is such a scary word for us, right? But in strategic management, retrenchment is not only about cutting heads or firing people. The first thing that can be done via retrenchment is to sell off land and buildings to raise needed cash, pruning product lines or closing down production of product lines that prove to be unprofitable. Okay, so close marginal businesses, closing obsolete factories, automate the processes, and last resort is reducing the number of employees. So retrenchment is not the misnomer that we're hearing that it's all about cutting heads or firing people. It has a lot of options. And then, of course, divesting. Divesting would involve, it's also a form of diversification, but divesting would be also related to diversification strategies, wherein you try to do spin-offs, okay, by selecting companies that would have synergy or has aligned competence with your company. And then the last resort, of course, is liquidation, otherwise known as bankruptcy. So sa Pilipinas, hindi uso na tinutulungan ng mga nababankrupt, di ba? So bahala kayo na yung assets nyo ay It goes first to the creditors in case you cannot settle your liabilities. So these things are just some of the framework that I made. I have thought over the weekend. And then I hope that I was able to share with you some of the insights or experiences that I have as a strategic management professor in our university. So the last message is, of course, for all of these things, we should be responsible, we should be compassionate, and we should be very sensitive to the needs of each and every one of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarreal.